There are very few things in life which are inevitable. Growing older, eating pizza, and morbidly, death is one of them.
We all know that death will come, but at the same time we don't know. Death seems so close to us, and yet so far away. Death is simultaneously horrible and paradoxically celebrated. Don't believe me? Dia de los Muertos is a celebration done in Spain, meaning Day of the Dead. Also, funerals are basically a celebration of the life they once lived. And finally, we got a whole holiday around Jesus dying. He did get resurrected, but my point still stands. I think it's weird for celebrations to be about death, but also understandable. Death is a very heavy topic, so it's very interesting to see how different media deals with it. And to my surprise, they don't. Usually, death is seen as a one and done thing. People die, characters get sad, they move on. And even more surprisingly, this gets done quite quickly. And it kind of makes sense. No one wants to see a stop story in an action movie. And no one likes games that drag. But once in a while, although rare, there are games and media that do things differently and shakes up the medium. What Remains of Edith Finch is one such game. How do we even make games about death? The narrative of the medium actually encourages you to die. In modern games, you're supposed to die over and over and over again. Sometimes to learn from your mistakes. Sometimes you can't even avoid death. Dying is just an inevitability. In some games, the death of your friends don't even matter, since your team can be revived. And because of this, death in video games has basically become meaningless and mostly unavoidable. There is no consequence for you dying, or sometimes even your friends or team members dying. And if there is, it's usually not that major. The most unique thing this game does is that you can watch the moment someone dies from their perspective. Not only that, but the game actually takes this one step further and actually shows you what they're thinking. Something I've never seen any piece of media do. If you want to see the game, do it now since it's very short. Only around 2 hours. And because of this, I can't really talk much about the game without giving too much away. This game may be one of the best narrative games ever made. So go watch a playthrough at least. Although this video won't spoil the game completely, this is your spoiler warning. Although deaths of characters are bad, as bad for me to say, the game sees death as a celebration, putting on these spectacles for the most horrific of deaths. That kind of reminds me of another game. The family of Edith Finch has a curse. The deaths from this family is unprecedentedly high. And the way in which the members of the family die is cruel and unjust. It must be a curse. How else could they be so unlucky? How else could everyone from this family die except you? You inherit the house after your mother died. In the real world, death is celebrated. As I said before, we got a whole holiday around Jesus dying. And funerals are basically a celebration around one's death. I believe death is seen as a celebration sometimes due to it being the only way we can cope with it. Nothing more, nothing less. Dying seems bearable, maybe even beautiful, if celebrated. In the game What Remains of Edith Finch, the deaths aren't described normally. The boy didn't die falling off a swing, he flew.
The day he made up his mind to fly.
The idol didn't die because the dragon-shaped house he built fell on him. He was killed by a monster. All these grand tales to make the legacy of these people stick. What can be chalked up to a series of coincidences and unfortunate accidents is all now a curse. And now, by exaggerating these stories in how these people died, the curse seems a bit more real. Because of this so-called curse, the news wants in. Why wouldn't they? It's a great story. A family of bright, talented, imaginative people have been cursed for their fortunes they have inherited. Since death is widely celebrated and glamorized, that got me thinking, what is the best way to die? Well, in 206 BC, a man named Chrysippus allegedly died laughing after witnessing a donkey eat a fig. I can't think of a better way to end it all. In the game, there is a baby that died from drowning. The baby was described as happy. Too happy. The fault was taken away from the mother, even though it was her fault. It was her neglect that killed the baby. The fault was put on the baby, maybe even the curse, just to make death more bearable.
I'm sure he's happy. And he'd want you to be happy too. Good luck, Kay. Love, Sam.
Chrysippus and the baby apparently died laughing. They were too happy for their own good. Is there ever a scenario where choosing to not live is better than choosing to live? Many people will say no, but I would like to present an example of why someone may choose this, and why euthanasia should be legal everywhere. Let's say someone has developed a brain disease. This person is suffering from this condition, and has been suffering for a while. They have been declared of sound mind and decided dying is better than living. They want a fast death, and not a slow one. The case I described is a real life case of Diane Pretty. She had motor neuron disease and wanted to die, but couldn't. She lived in the UK where euthanasia was illegal. She was stripped of her right to die with dignity, and ended up dying a slow and miserable death. No one could help her, because if they did, they would be charged with murder. These series of events are unlikely. The chance of you developing motor neuron disease is quite low, about 1.4%. Being in a situation where dying is better than living is extremely rare, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about them and give importance to them. Self-driving cars are generally better than their human counterparts, but we still make them do the trolley problem and give them an unreasonable amount of effort to do them correctly. And although planes are the most safest way to transport humans, that doesn't mean plane crashes should not get an increased amount of attention. Just because something is rare, doesn't mean it should not get attention. Diane Pretty protested and tried to get euthanasia legalised in the UK. Her cries were not heard. More than 2 decades later, it is still illegal. Countless people suffered when they shouldn't have. There is a scene in how someone dies in the game. This scene is both incredible and I feel relatable. A scene where someone works a monotonous routine every day of his life. Put the fish in the guillotine, back and forth, back and forth. Don't look away now. While this is happening, he starts to daydream. Then his imagination takes over. First slowly, then faster and faster. The whole screen is filled. The music takes over, the pacing gets faster. He's travelled far lands and conquered kingdoms. He built a castle. And finally, he can become king of this new world. The world he has spent so much effort building. All he needs to do is
bend down his head. And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
living is torture. He wanted to die. There is this Instagram page called The King of Chemo. He is dying from brain cancer.
I may have terminal brain cancer, but you know what I say to my cancer? Fuck you! I am gonna use my brain cancer against itself to raise the most amount of money ever for ruling America.
He won't be alive for much longer. But instead of dwelling on that, he has made a page dedicated to do what he wants before he goes. And I can't help think, because he was faced with certain death, he was able to be set free from whatever his life was before the cancer. If you change your way of thinking, dying can be made bearable. But all good things must come to an end. Zom 100 also follows a similar path to this Instagram profile. A zombie apocalypse happens, and instead of just trying to survive like any other person would, this person takes it as an opportunity to finish their bucket list. Why not, right? The full title is called Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead. People should be sad over dying, but instead of letting that get to us, we spin it a positive way. Lewis didn't kill himself. He wanted to be with his imagination more than us. The Finches were bright as they were brilliant, but that brought them a curse, to make death more bearable. Ironically, because of this belief in a so-called curse, 2 others directly died from it. One was where someone was trapped in a basement till he had enough, and the other where his imagination was too big for his job. That is gut-wrenching. They got told stories about how people in their family were flying and making incredible houses and fighting a dragon. While he is there, they both are there, chopping fish and living in a basement. They barely lived, because death was at their doorstep. We can either let death free us, or control us. Is immortality a fate worse than death? No. How could it be? If every single fear stems from a single one, which is fear of dying, how can the opposite be much worse? People who believe that immortality is a fate much worse, believe that to make death more bearable. It is all one big cope. And yet, people, many people, believe immortality is a fate much worse. Countless more Finches indirectly died from this belief of a curse. The Finches didn't treat their children well. Who leaves a baby in a bathtub unattended? And who builds a swing near a cliff? But because they believed in the curse, the fault was taken away from their parents and onto something else. The parents never changed their ways, leading to more deaths. Maybe this explains why there is an unexpectedly high death toll of children in the family. The parents never changed, and the children paid the price.
But now I'm worried the stories themselves might be the problem. Maybe we believed so much in a family curse, we made it real.
Believing in the family curse made death more bearable. But also, it gave death more power. Many holy books describe a place after death. This is heaven and hell, and the waiting room is usually called purgatory. But what makes us believe in things we obviously can't prove? Maybe it's because to make death more bearable.
We describe death as a living thing, but sometimes that takes us away. We think we can say F you to death by living life to the fullest, all but locking ourselves in the basement. We believe in curses and we celebrate death to remember them. We can either let death free us or control us. We make up stories and we exaggerate them to give the life they live more meaning. We seem to think a fate worse than dying is immortality. We twist it to a positive thing. We believe in heaven and hell and maybe even gods. All to convince ourselves, even if it's slight, that death is bearable. By making death more bearable, you may cause more people to die.